A golden eagle soars across the horizon as thousands of Roman soldiers march through foreign territory. Leading them is not a distant general, but the emperor himself, resplendent in gleaming armor, personally commanding the greatest territorial expansion Rome would ever witness. This man would forever change the destiny of antiquity's mightiest empire, and not through warfare alone. In an era when Rome seemed to have reached its limits, one leader dared to dream of an empire even greater, more prosperous, and more just. This is Trajan, the emperor who would be called Optimus Princeps, the best of princes. In the year 98 after Christ, when Rome was already the dominant power of the Mediterranean world, Marcus Ulpius Trajanus ascended to the imperial throne. What no one could have predicted was that this man of Hispanic origin, the first emperor born outside Italy, would lead Rome to its territorial peak and usher in an unprecedented era of prosperity. His legacy would transcend centuries and shape our understanding of what it means to rule with true greatness. The story of Trajan reveals one of history's most remarkable leaders, a military commander who understood that empires are built not only by conquering new lands, but by improving the lives of citizens. While most emperors before him were content to maintain Rome's boundaries, Trajan pushed further than anyone had dared, extending Roman influence from the misty forests of Britain to the sun-scorched deserts of Mesopotamia. But what truly sets Trajan apart in the annals of history was his revolutionary vision of governance. In an age of tyrants and despots, he introduced social welfare programs, reformed the justice system, and invested massively in public works that benefited ordinary Romans. His contemporaries didn't just fear or respect him, they genuinely loved him, awarding him a title no other emperor would ever receive: Optimus Princeps, literally the best ruler. If you love history and want to unravel the mysteries of great empires like this video, subscribe to the Legacy of Empires channel and don't miss a single episode. Let's dive into the fascinating story of the man who transformed Rome into the greatest power the ancient world had ever seen. Trajan was born in the year 53 after Christ in Italica, a Roman colony in Hispania, what we now know as Spain. This provincial birthplace would seem an unlikely origin for one of Rome's greatest emperors. Picture a bustling colonial town where Latin mingled with local tongues and where Roman customs blended with Iberian traditions. It was here, under the warm Mediterranean sun, that the future emperor took his first steps. As the son of a prominent general, young Marcus Ulpius Trajanus was immersed in military life from childhood. Can you imagine growing up surrounded by legionnaires, listening to war stories, and watching military drills? This upbringing shaped him profoundly. Following in his father's footsteps, he embarked on a military career where his exceptional competence and natural leadership quickly set him apart from his peers. What's fascinating about Trajan's rise to power is that it wasn't achieved through bloody conquest or palace intrigue, the typical paths to power in Rome. Instead, his ascension came through something remarkably rare in Roman history: a strategic adoption. By the year 97 after Christ, the elderly Emperor Nerva found himself in a precarious position. Without sons to inherit his throne and facing mounting pressure from the Praetorian Guard, he desperately needed a successor who could appease both the restless army and the suspicious Senate. In a move that surprised many, he looked beyond Rome's aristocratic families to the frontier provinces, setting his sights on Trajan, then serving as governor of Upper Germania. Imagine the whispers that must have filled Rome's marble halls when news arrived that Nerva had adopted a provincial military commander as his son and heir. Yet this decision proved masterful. When Nerva died in 98 after Christ, the transfer of power happened peacefully, something truly extraordinary by Roman standards, where imperial succession was often marked by assassination and civil war. What most Romans didn't realize at the time was that this military commander from the provinces wasn't just skilled in the art of war. Behind Trajan's soldiers' demeanor lay a revolutionary vision of governance that would transform the empire. He understood something that few rulers before him had grasped, that true imperial power came not just from military might, but from the prosperity and loyalty of common citizens. Trajan had spent years in the provinces, far from the marble palaces of Rome. He had seen firsthand how imperial policies affected ordinary people throughout the empire. This perspective gave him unique insights that Rome-born emperors simply didn't possess. He envisioned a government that combined military strength with social justice, a concept virtually unprecedented until then. The Senate and people of Rome were about to discover that their new emperor from distant Hispania would not only lead armies to victory, but would also forge a new understanding of what an emperor could and should be for his people. The provincial outsider was about to become Rome's most beloved ruler. When we think of warrior emperors, few can rival Trajan. Under his command, Rome reached its maximum territorial extent, an achievement that would never be equaled again in Roman history. While Augustus may have consolidated power and Claudius conquered Britain, it was Trajan who truly pushed the boundaries of what the Roman Empire could become. His first major military campaign targeted the Dacians, a powerful people who inhabited the region of modern-day Romania. The Dacian king Decebalus had been a thorn in Rome's side for years, raiding across the Danube frontier and defying Roman authority. What made the Dacians particularly troublesome wasn't just their military prowess, but their incredible wealth. Their lands were rich in gold and silver mines, resources that Rome coveted desperately. Trajan decided to resolve the Dacian problem once and for all. In two bloody wars between 101 and 106 after Christ, he led the Roman legions personally across the Danube. Picture this: the emperor himself at the front lines, sharing the hardships of his soldiers, planning strategies around campfires, and inspiring his troops through personal example. This was no distant ruler sending others to die. This was a commander who led from the front. The Dacian wars were brutal struggles against a determined enemy. The Romans had to build a massive bridge across the Danube, an engineering marvel designed by the brilliant architect Apollodorus of Damascus. Spanning more than 1,000 meters across one of Europe's mightiest rivers, this bridge stood as testimony to Roman engineering prowess. Imagine the Dacians watching in awe and fear as this impossible structure slowly stretched across the waters that had always protected their homeland. After years of fierce fighting, Trajan not only defeated the Dacians, but completely annexed their territory to the empire. King Decebalus, rather than face capture, took his own life, a moment dramatically depicted in Roman art. The victory brought Rome incredible spoils. Legend has it that so much gold was seized that it crashed the Roman economy, causing inflation throughout the empire. The triumph was so significant that Trajan commissioned an impressive monument, Trajan's Column, which still stands in Rome today. Standing 30 meters tall, this remarkable structure features a spiral frieze that narrates the entire military campaign in 155 detailed scenes. Think of it as a marble comic book telling the emperor's glory for eternity. If unrolled, this continuous strip would stretch for 200 meters, preserving for all time the faces, weapons, tactics, and drama of the Dacian conquest. But Trajan didn't stop there. In 113 after Christ, in his 60s, an age when most men in the ancient world would be considered elderly, he launched a campaign against the Parthian Empire, Rome's great eastern rival. The Parthians, descendants of Persian military tradition, were the one power that had consistently checked Roman expansion eastward. In a lightning campaign that shocked the ancient world, Trajan conquered Armenia and Mesopotamia, eventually reaching all the way to the Persian Gulf, taking the Roman eagles farther east than they had ever been before. Imagine the astonishment as Roman ships sailed the waters of the Tigris River, in lands that had never known Roman rule. where the languages, customs, and gods were entirely foreign to Mediterranean traditions. For a brief, shining moment, Alexander the Great's dream of uniting East and West seemed to be reborn under the Roman banner. Trajan stood at the shores of the Persian Gulf, looking eastward toward India, reportedly lamenting that he was too old to follow in Alexander's footsteps further into Asia. What makes these conquests even more remarkable is that Trajan accomplished them without emptying the imperial treasury or overtaxing the provinces. Unlike many conquerors, he understood that sustainable empire building required more than just military victory. It needed sound administration and economic integration of new territories. The empire Trajan created stretched from the foggy shores of Scotland to the burning sands of Arabia, from the Atlantic Ocean to the Persian Gulf. It was a multicultural, multilingual colossus encompassing millions of people from dozens of ethnic groups. And at its center stood one man, the emperor who had expanded Roman power to its ultimate limits. What truly sets Trajan apart from other warrior emperors is that while he expanded Rome's borders, he simultaneously revolutionized life within them. For the first time, a Roman emperor looked seriously at the social problems plaguing the empire. This dual focus, conquering abroad while reforming at home, created a golden age that Romans would remember nostalgically for centuries. In an unprecedented move, Trajan established the Alimenta, the first social welfare program in Western history. Think about that for a moment. Nearly 2,000 years before modern welfare systems, this Roman emperor created a systematic approach to fighting poverty. The Alimenta provided financial assistance to poor families throughout Italy to help them raise their children. The objectives were twofold: combat poverty and increase the Italian population, which had been declining steadily for generations. Imagine the scene. Families who previously couldn't feed their children now receiving direct aid from the state. In an ancient society, this concept was revolutionary. Historical records show that in some towns, up to 300 children received monthly support. For a world where the powerful rarely concerned themselves with the fate of the poor, this represented a fundamental shift in thinking about the responsibilities of government. The program worked ingeniously. The imperial treasury provided loans to landowners at low interest rates. These interest payments then funded the alimenta. The system created a sustainable funding mechanism rather than a drain on the treasury. The children who received this support became known as Trajan's children, and they wore special medallions identifying them as beneficiaries of imperial generosity. The emperor wasn't just building roads and aqueducts, though he certainly excelled at that too. He was investing directly in people. This social innovation reveals a leader who understood that a truly great empire depends not just on conquered territories, but on the welfare of its citizens. And speaking of construction, Trajan's public works program transformed the landscape of Rome and the provinces. His building projects were so extensive that there was a saying, "Trajan builds like the bees make honey." The crown jewel was the magnificent Forum of Trajan, considered an architectural marvel of the age. Designed by Apollodorus of Damascus, the same brilliant architect who engineered Trajan's bridge over the Danube, the Forum covered more than 5 acres in the heart of Rome. What made the Forum truly spectacular wasn't just its size, but its unprecedented splendor. At its center stood the Basilica Ulpia, one of the largest buildings in the ancient world. The complex included 2 libraries, one for Latin texts and one for Greek, showcasing Trajan's commitment to learning and his respect for both Western and Eastern intellectual traditions. But Trajan's construction boom went far beyond Rome. He built ports, roads, aqueducts, and public baths throughout the empire. The harbor at Ostia was expanded dramatically, allowing more grain ships to supply Rome's growing population. New roads connected distant provinces, facilitating trade and military movement. Aqueducts brought fresh water to growing cities. These projects weren't mere monuments to his glory, but practical infrastructure that improved everyday life and stimulated commerce. What's particularly remarkable is how Trajan paid for this massive building program. Unlike previous emperors who often funded projects by raising taxes, he used the spoils from his Dacian conquests. The gold and silver mines of Dacia, modern Romania, provided such wealth that Trajan could fund his social programs and construction projects without burdening the populace with additional taxation. In fact, he was able to reduce taxes in some provinces while still filling the treasury. Did you know that Trajan's Forum was so impressive that centuries later, Emperor Constantine said it was a work unique under the heavens? When Constantine visited Rome in the 4th century after Christ, some 200 years after Trajan's death, he stood speechless before the Forum, overwhelmed by its grandeur. Even today, the remaining column of Trajan stands as a testament to this emperor's vision, reaching skyward in the heart of modern Rome. So while other emperors focused solely on conquest or indulged in luxury and excess, Trajan created a balanced approach to imperial rule that improved lives across social classes. He understood something profound, that the greatest military success means little if the people at home suffer. His legacy teaches us that true leadership combines strength with compassion, vision with practical solutions, and glory with responsibility. If you're enjoying this video, like it, share it, and subscribe to the Legacy of Empires channel for more incredible stories. And tell us in the comments, which leader in history do you think best balanced military conquests and social advances like Trajan did? Optimus Princeps, the best of princes. This title wasn't bestowed upon Trajan by modern historians looking back through time, but by the Romans themselves who lived under his rule. And there was a clear reason for this unprecedented honor: his revolutionary approach to justice. Before Trajan, the Roman legal system frequently favored the wealthy and powerful. Justice was often for sale to the highest bidder, and ordinary citizens had little hope of fair treatment when facing opponents with deeper pockets or better connections. It's worth remembering that Rome, for all its architectural and military glory, was a deeply unequal society where the elite controlled nearly every aspect of life. The new emperor changed this by reforming the courts, ensuring that even the most humble citizens had access to justice. He appointed judges based on merit rather than political connections. He streamlined court procedures to reduce delays that benefited the wealthy who could afford lengthy litigation. And most importantly, he personally demonstrated his commitment to fair treatment for all. We have a remarkable window into Trajan's approach to justice through his letters to Pliny the Younger, the governor of Bithynia. These letters, preserved for nearly 2,000 years, reveal a leader deeply concerned with the fair application of laws and opposed to arbitrary persecutions. In one famous exchange, Pliny asked Trajan how to handle Christians in his province. The emperor's response was strikingly moderate for the time. Don't hunt them down, don't accept anonymous accusations, and give the accused opportunities to recant. This may not sound revolutionary to modern ears, but in a world where emperors routinely used religious minorities as scapegoats, Trajan's measured response revealed his commitment to justice over mob popularity. He insisted on due process at a time when most rulers simply sought convenient targets for public anger. A famous anecdote perfectly illustrates his character. One day, as Trajan was walking through Rome, an ordinary citizen approached him with a petition. The imperial guards immediately moved to push the man away, as was customary. But Trajan stopped them and said, "Why can I not spare a few minutes for this man when I owe my position to all citizens?" Then, to everyone's astonishment, the emperor of the known world stood in the street, listening patiently to the concerns of an ordinary Roman. This was not a common attitude for a Roman emperor. While many saw themselves as living gods above the common people, Trajan saw himself as a servant of the people and the state, an almost modern concept of leadership emerging in ancient Rome. Think about how radical this perspective was. In an age of absolute monarchs who claimed divine status, here was a ruler who understood his power came from the people he governed. Trajan established regular hours when any citizen could approach him with grievances. He sat for long days, hearing cases himself, often ruling against the interests of the wealthy and powerful when justice demanded it. In the provinces, he instituted circuit judges to hear local disputes, bringing Roman justice closer to ordinary provincial subjects who previously had little recourse against corruption or abuse. What's particularly fascinating is how Trajan balanced clemency with firmness. While he was known for his fairness, he was no pushover. He maintained strict discipline among government officials, severely punishing corruption. There's a story that when a newly appointed governor was setting off to his province, Trajan handed him a dagger saying, "Use this for me if I govern well, against me if I govern badly." Whether the story is literal truth or symbolic, it captures his philosophy perfectly. The legal reforms Trajan implemented outlived him by centuries. His codification of laws, clarification of judicial procedures, and emphasis on merit in judicial appointments became foundations of Roman law that would eventually influence legal systems throughout Europe and beyond. Perhaps what's most striking about Trajan's approach to justice is how personal it was. Unlike many rulers who proclaim lofty principles while behaving differently in private, Trajan lived his values. Court records show him repeatedly ruling against his own financial interests when justice required it. He understood something fundamental that many leaders before and since have forgotten, that true authority comes not from fear, but from earning the respect and trust of those you govern. In Trajan's court, the poorest farmer could expect the same hearing as the wealthiest senator. This commitment to equal justice, regardless of social station, wasn't just morally right, it was strategically brilliant. It created loyalty throughout the empire that no amount of military conquest could have secured. People who feel justly treated rarely rebel, a lesson many rulers throughout history failed to learn. It's no wonder then that the Senate and people of Rome granted him a title never given to any emperor before or since. Optimus Princeps, truly the best of princes. In the year 117 after Christ, at the height of his Eastern campaign, Trajan fell seriously ill. The man who had led armies across continents, who had stood at the farthest reaches of the known world, now faced an enemy he could not defeat. Deciding to return to Rome, perhaps hoping to die in the city he had transformed, he managed to travel only as far as Selinus, on the coast of Cilicia, in what is now Turkey. There, at the age of 63, Rome's greatest emperor breathed his last. It's here that we encounter one of the great mysteries of his reign, a palace intrigue worthy of a modern political thriller. On his deathbed, Trajan supposedly adopted Hadrian as his successor. But did he really? Many historians suspect that Empress Plotina, Trajan's wife and a fervent supporter of Hadrian, may have orchestrated this adoption after the emperor's death. Consider the circumstances. Hadrian wasn't even present at Trajan's deathbed, but conveniently, Plotina was. According to some ancient sources, she delayed announcing Trajan's death until adoption documents could be prepared. Some accounts even suggest she arranged for someone to hide behind the curtains of the imperial bedchamber to imitate the voice of the dying emperor, proclaiming Hadrian as his chosen heir. What makes this mystery particularly intriguing is that Hadrian was indeed a logical choice for succession. He was Trajan's cousin and had been married to Trajan's grandniece. He had served as governor of Syria and was a capable administrator. Yet, throughout his reign, Trajan had never formally named Hadrian as his successor, despite ample opportunity to do so. Why wait until his final moments, when he was too ill to appear in public? Adding to the suspicion, the letter to the Senate announcing Hadrian's adoption arrived signed by Plotina, not Trajan himself. When questioned about this irregularity, the official explanation was that the emperor had been too weak to sign it himself. Convenient, isn't it? Whether true or not, this story shows how even the greatest emperors couldn't escape palace intrigues. The transition of power, even from Rome's most beloved ruler, still involved backroom deals and possible deception. For all the empire's grandeur and legal sophistication, succession remained its greatest vulnerability. What we know with certainty is that Trajan's body was cremated, and his ashes were carried back to Rome, making him the only emperor to have his remains buried within the city limits, beneath his imposing column in the forum that bears his name. This extraordinary honor speaks volumes about how Romans viewed their Optimus Princeps. The funeral procession must have been an unforgettable sight. Imagine it. The urn containing the ashes of Rome's greatest emperor carried through streets lined with mourning citizens. People who had never seen the living emperor now came to pay respects to his remains. Veterans who had fought under his command stood with tears streaming down weathered faces. Children who had received support through his Alimenta program scattered flowers before the procession. This final journey ended at the base of Trajan's column, where the ashes were placed in a golden urn and sealed within the pedestal. Think about this remarkable decision. While other emperors built elaborate mausoleums outside the city walls, Trajan's remains were placed directly in the heart of Rome, beneath the monument that chronicled his greatest military achievement. For centuries afterward, Romans would pass by this column, look up at its spiral of carved battles, and know that beneath their feet lay the man who had taken Rome to its greatest heights. His physical presence in the city center served as a constant reminder of what leadership could and should be. Hadrian, whether legitimately adopted or not, proved a worthy successor. His first act as emperor was to abandon many of Trajan's eastern conquests, recognizing they were overextensions that Rome couldn't sustain. While this might seem a rejection of Trajan's expansionist policy, it actually showed wise governance. Hadrian understood that consolidation sometimes matters more than conquest. In a final irony, the mystery surrounding Trajan's succession arrangements might have been exactly what he intended. Perhaps the great emperor, knowing death was near, deliberately left matters ambiguous. After all, a leader who had shown such political brilliance throughout his life would hardly have failed to plan for his death. Maybe the supposed deception by Plotina was actually Trajan's final masterstroke, allowing a succession to occur that he wanted, but that might have been politically difficult to arrange openly. We'll never know for certain what happened in that distant bedchamber in Selinus. But the enigma of Trajan's final days adds a fascinating human dimension to the story of Rome's most accomplished emperor, reminding us that even the greatest leaders remain, in the end, merely mortal. Few rulers in history have cast such a long shadow as Trajan. While many emperors achieved fame or notoriety during their lifetimes, Trajan's impact extends far beyond his era, resonating through the corridors of time for nearly 2 millennia. For centuries after Trajan's death, the Roman Senate greeted each new emperor with a remarkable phrase: Felicior Augusto, melior Traiano. May you be more fortunate than Augustus and better than Trajan. Consider the weight of these words. Augustus, the founder of the imperial system, had established peace after decades of civil war and transformed Rome from a republic to an empire. Yet Trajan was the measuring stick against which all rulers were judged. This simple blessing reveals how his reign became the gold standard of imperial governance. What's truly extraordinary is how Trajan's reputation survived the dramatic cultural shifts that followed Rome's fall. During the Christian Middle Ages, when pagan emperors were typically viewed with disdain or outright condemnation, Trajan maintained an exceptional standing. While other emperors were relegated to the role of persecutors or tyrants in medieval chronicles, Trajan emerged as a symbol of justice and good governance that transcended religious divisions. This reverence gave rise to one of the most fascinating legends of medieval Christianity, According to the story, Pope Gregory the Great, who lived 500 years after Trajan, became so moved upon reading accounts of the emperor's justice that he wept and prayed fervently for Trajan's soul. The legend claims that Gregory's tears were so sincere, his prayers so powerful, that God granted a special dispensation and released Trajan's soul from hell, the only pagan ever to receive such an honor in Christian legend. This extraordinary tale appears in numerous medieval texts and was even incorporated into Dante's Divine Comedy, where the poet places Trajan in paradise rather than hell, despite his paganism. Imagine the power of a reputation that could transcend the rigid religious boundaries of medieval thought. While countless other Roman emperors were consigned to damnation in popular imagination, Trajan alone was deemed worthy of salvation. The legend reflects something profound about Trajan's legacy. His commitment to justice was so exemplary that it spoke across centuries and religious divides. The story that most moved Pope Gregory involved a widow who stopped Trajan as he was leaving for war. When she begged for justice for her murdered son, the emperor not only delayed his military campaign but personally took up her case. This image of the world's most powerful man pausing to ensure justice for the weakest member of society became emblematic of ideal leadership. But perhaps most fascinating is how Trajan's model of leadership influenced political thought across millennia. When Niccolò Machiavelli, the great Renaissance political thinker, looked back through history for examples of effective rulers, he identified Trajan as one of the 5 good emperors whose example should be followed by governors and princes. This assessment, coming from the coldly pragmatic Machiavelli, speaks volumes about Trajan's practical achievements as well as his moral standing. And it's not difficult to understand why. In Trajan, we see a leader who balanced military power, social justice, and economic prosperity in a way few have managed before or since. He expanded borders while strengthening institutions at home. He built magnificent monuments while caring for society's most vulnerable. His reign demonstrated that might and compassion need not be opposing forces. This balanced approach to leadership resonated through the ages. When Emperor Charles V held dominion over vast territories in the 16th century, his tutors explicitly held up Trajan as his model, a Spanish-born ruler who had mastered the art of governing a diverse empire. During the Enlightenment, philosophers searching for examples of enlightened despotism frequently turned to Trajan. Even Napoleon, planning his own imperial system, studied Trajan's methods of governance and public works. The physical reminders of Trajan's rule have proved remarkably enduring as well. His column still stands in Rome, its spiral narrative of conquest rising nearly 150 feet into the air. A stone comic book telling his story to generations who would never know him. The markets he built still partially stand, an early shopping complex that revolutionized urban planning. His rebuilt harbor at Ostia transformed Rome's connection to the Mediterranean world and established patterns of trade that would last for centuries. Even Trajan's approach to governance created ripples through time. His correspondence with Pliny the Younger established precedents for how central authorities should interact with provincial governors. Precedents that would influence imperial administration not just in Rome, but in later empires that modeled themselves on Roman patterns. The mark of true greatness in leadership isn't just what's accomplished during one's lifetime, it's the legacy that endures long after. By this measure, Trajan achieved something remarkable. In a world of conquerors and tyrants, he showed that the mightiest empire on earth could be led with justice and compassion. In an age when power typically meant privilege for the few, he demonstrated how authority could be used to benefit the many. Perhaps this is why, nearly 2,000 years after his death, we still speak of him as Optimus Princeps, truly the best of princes. In Trajan, we find not just a historical figure, but a timeless ideal of leadership that continues to challenge and inspire us today. Trajan's legacy reveals something fundamental about power and leadership. True greatness comes from balance. As we've seen throughout his remarkable story, while he conquered new territories, he simultaneously strengthened institutions at home. While he built majestic monuments that still stand today, he also cared deeply for society's most vulnerable citizens. His reign was marked as much by the sword as by the pen, as much by power as by compassion. What makes this balance so extraordinary is how rare it has been throughout history. Most conquerors leave behind only ruins and tales of bloodshed. Trajan left behind an empire at its zenith, not just in territorial size, but in prosperity, justice, and stability. The Pax Romana, that famous period of Roman peace, reached its fullest expression under his rule, creating a time when commerce flourished across 3 continents and dozens of cultures found common ground under the Roman eagle. In an era when leadership often meant dominance through force alone, Trajan reminds us that the greatest leaders are those who elevate their people, who build not merely monuments of stone and marble, but more just societies. Consider how revolutionary his Alimenta program was, the first systematic welfare initiative in Western history. While other emperors were content to provide bread and circuses as temporary distractions, Trajan created structures that addressed poverty at its roots. Perhaps this is why, almost 2,000 years after his death, we still speak of him as Optimus Princeps, not merely the most powerful, but truly the best of princes. When the Senate bestowed this title upon him, they weren't simply flattering the man who controlled their fate. They were acknowledging something rare and precious: leadership that combined strength with wisdom, authority with responsibility. Look around at Trajan's Rome, a city transformed by his vision. The markets that bear his name offered covered shopping to thousands, an innovation we take for granted today. His Forum, with its soaring column that still dominates the Roman skyline, wasn't just a monument to ego, but a functional public space where justice was administered and commerce conducted. Even his conquest of Dacia wasn't merely about military glory. It secured gold mines that funded public works throughout the empire without raising taxes on ordinary citizens. What can we learn from Trajan today? In our world of polarized politics and leadership that often seems to choose between compassion and strength, Trajan offers a powerful alternative. He shows us that effective leadership doesn't require choosing between building military might and creating social safety nets, between fiscal responsibility and public investment, between tradition and innovation. The greatest leaders like Trajan find ways to pursue these seeming opposites simultaneously. Which aspects of his leadership would be most valuable in our modern world? Perhaps his understanding that power exists to serve the people, not the other way around. Or his recognition that the true strength of a nation lies not just in its military or economy, but in the well-being of its citizens. Maybe it's his willingness to listen to ordinary people, to stand in the street and hear their concerns directly, rather than remaining isolated in palaces of power. As we conclude our journey through the life and times of Rome's greatest emperor, I invite you to reflect on how Trajan's balanced approach to leadership might inform our understanding of governance today. In a world facing complex challenges from climate change to economic inequality, couldn't we use more leaders who combine Trajan's pragmatic problem-solving with his genuine concern for the common good? If you've enjoyed this exploration of one of history's most remarkable leaders, please like this video, share it with friends who appreciate great stories from the ancient world, and subscribe to the Legacy of Empires channel to join us for more fascinating content about the ancient age. We have many more captivating stories of great empires and legendary leaders to share. Activate the notification bell to be alerted about our upcoming videos. In our next episodes, we'll explore other pivotal figures who shaped the ancient world, some through conquest, others through ideas, all leaving legacies that continue to influence our lives today. Until our next historical adventure, this is Legacy of Empires, bringing the past vividly to life.